Everyone's talking about Loewe, but almost no one knows how it got here. It wasn't always front row at Fashion Week. It didn't have viral bags or surrealist campaigns or Beyoncé on speed dial. In fact, just a decade ago, most people couldn't even pronounce its name. Today, it's the most talked about brand in fashion, topping charts, selling out collections, and redefining what luxury looks like. But Loewe didn't rise the usual way. It didn't follow trends. It didn't play it safe. It took risks. It got weird. And under one unlikely creative director, it became something no one saw coming. A global phenomenon. Now, that creative mind, Jonathan Anderson, is leaving. And the future of the brand is suddenly uncertain. Because when a brand is built around one vision, what happens when that vision walks away? The brand wasn't always part of fashion's front row. In fact, for most of its history, it wasn't even trying to be. The brand began in 1846, not as a luxury house, but as a small leather workshop in Madrid. A group of artisans quietly making high-quality leather goods with no logos, no runway shows, and no real ambition to be anything more than excellent at what they did. It was slow, intentional work, the kind that doesn't scale well, but earns respect. Then a German craftsman, Enrique Loewe Rosberg, joined the team. He saw the potential to turn this collective into something bigger. The name stuck. And over time, Loewe became known not just for its leather, but for a kind of understated elegance that didn't need to announce itself. In 1905, it became the official supplier to the Spanish royal family, which sounds huge, and it was, but the brand still operated mostly under the radar. It was respected, not hyped. Famous names carried it: Ava Gardner, Sophia Loren, Ernest Hemingway. But you had to be paying attention to even notice. It wasn't a brand people flaunted. It was one they kept to themselves. Even when the Amazona bag launched in the 1970s, the brand's first real icon, it didn't scream for attention. No hardware, no monograms, just soft, flawless leather and a minimalist silhouette. It was the kind of bag people noticed up close, not across a room. But in fashion, discretion doesn't always scale. And as the industry moved into the 1990s and 2000s, an era of super brands, logomania, and bigger-than-life creative directors, Loewe started to fade into the background. Yes, it had the LVMH backing. And yes, it continued to make beautifully crafted pieces. But without a clear identity or direction, it became one of those legacy names people kind of recognized, but didn't really care about. It was stuck in a strange middle ground, too quiet to compete with the new wave of luxury, too rooted in tradition to fully reinvent itself. The product was still beautiful, but the brand, it had no story. And in fashion, that's when you start to disappear. By the early 2000s, Loewe had everything a brand was supposed to need: heritage, quality, the LVMH stamp of approval, but none of it really translated into relevance. Other luxury houses were becoming global powerhouses. Gucci had Tom Ford, Dior had Galliano, Louis Vuitton had Marc Jacobs. Fashion was about personalities, bold visions, reinvention. And Loewe, they had nice bags. The brand cycled through a handful of creative directors, hoping one of them would crack the code. Narciso Rodriguez gave it minimalism. Stuart Vevers leaned into color and youth. There were flashes of good press, the occasional strong collection, but nothing stuck. There was no real identity, just a revolving door of aesthetic directions that never quite matched the brand's DNA. Even with the resources of LVMH behind it, Loewe remained quiet. The kind of label that might get a mention in a magazine but never made headlines. You weren't going to see it on red carpets or dominating street-style galleries. It didn't have an it bag. It didn't have a point of view. And maybe that was part of the problem. In a decade where fashion was becoming faster, louder, and more image-driven, Loewe was still playing by old rules: beautiful leather, yes, but no story, no spark, nothing to hold on to. It was a brand that felt stuck in its own legacy, respected, sure, but forgotten. And for a while, it seemed like that might be the end of the story. However, a big shift came in 2013, and it started with one unexpected hire. The brand brought in Jonathan Anderson, a move that, at the time, felt kind of random. Anderson was 29, known mostly for his own label, J.W. Anderson, and definitely not part of the usual luxury circuit. His work was weird, offbeat, experimental, more fashion student darling than global creative director. But LVMH gave him the job anyway. And honestly, that changed everything. Anderson didn't just refresh Loewe. He ripped it apart and rebuilt it from scratch. New logo, new visual identity, new tone, new campaigns, new everything. And it didn't feel forced. It felt intentional. He took this old, quiet leather house and turned it into something playful, sharp, a little surreal. One season it was pixelated hoodies and balloon-heeled shoes. Another, it was subtle tank tops and sleek leather coats. There was always something a little off about it, in the best way. And suddenly, the brand started to feel relevant. Not because it was chasing trends, but because it was doing its own thing. The puzzle bag really marked the shift. It was practical, sculptural, minimal but clever. It looked unlike anything else out there, and it wasn't trying to be an it bag, but it became one. Quietly, it just hit. From there, everything picked up. The brand's identity started to solidify. The shows were creative but wearable. The products had personality without being gimmicky. Anderson was playing with art, texture, design, and he was doing it without ever losing sight of Loewe's roots in craft. People started paying attention, stylists, editors, celebrities, not in a flashy way, but in that kind of if you know way. What Anderson really brought was clarity. He gave the brand a voice, one that hadn't really existed before. And once it clicked, it was obvious. The brand didn't just look different, it felt different, like it finally knew who it was. Some brands work tirelessly to manufacture relevance. Loewe somehow just slipped into it. Once Anderson had restructured the bones of the brand, from its logo to its visual language to the product itself, the rest started falling into place. The campaigns felt sharper, the collections had personality, and when celebrities started wearing the brand, they weren't just styling looks, they were shaping cultural moments. Rihanna wore a custom crimson Loewe outfit at the Super Bowl halftime show, complete with a sculpted breastplate that became an instant internet moment. Beyoncé wore his surreal hand bodysuits on her Renaissance tour. Kylie Jenner posted in that now viral anagram tank top, and overnight, it was everywhere. But none of it felt like traditional celebrity marketing. It was strategic, sure, but with just enough weirdness to feel organic. That was the genius of it. Anderson didn't flood the space, he curated it. The brand didn't show up everywhere, but when it did, it left a mark. Then came the unexpected casting decisions. Sir Anthony Hopkins in a soft-spoken, minimal campaign. The White Lotus's Murray Bartlett in Loewe menswear, reading Kafka. Pieces that looked like they belonged in a museum just as much as a closet. There was always this push and pull, fashion as product versus fashion as concept. And Anderson let them exist side by side without explaining too much. If you got it, you got it. But it wasn't all pixelated hoodies and balloon heels. Anderson also gave people entry points, clean tank tops, sharp tailoring, classic outerwear, pieces that didn't scream for attention, but felt luxurious in the quietest way. Loewe didn't need a logo to sell you the fantasy. The fantasy was baked into the aesthetic. Still, the more a brand grows, the more cracks start to show. The anagram tank top was clever at first, minimalist, and instantly recognizable. But it spread fast. Too fast. What started as a cult item quickly became a saturation point. Same with the raffia totes. For every TikTok that showed them styled to perfection, Another popped up comparing dupe versions online. It's the double-edged sword of going viral. Mass appeal can dilute the magic. There's also been some quiet criticism around the brand's sense of accessibility. The brand's art school tone, its surrealism and references, its gallery-style stores, they create a world that can feel niche, even alienating. If you're deep in the fashion world, it's thrilling. But for the average shopper, the meaning behind the pieces isn't always clear, and that exclusivity can start to feel intentional. Anderson managed to walk that tightrope for years, balancing the commercial and the conceptual, giving the brand credibility with both fashion insiders and a new, younger consumer. But it was always a delicate dance. By 2023, Loewe was officially a fashion power player, top of the list index. More than 800 million TikTok views, sold-out drops, celebrity buzz. The numbers didn't just prove success, they proved something even rarer: desire. And yet, through it all, the brand never fully lost its weirdness, its edge. There was always a touch of offbeat energy that kept it from becoming just another polished luxury label. And that's exactly what made people pay attention. But once you reach that level, once you've redefined the brand, captured the culture, and climbed your way to the top, the question isn't what's next. It's what happens when the person who built it decides to leave. It was only a matter of time. In early 2025, Jonathan Anderson quietly stepped down from the brand. No over-the-top announcement, no farewell runway moment. Just one final show in Paris, presented not on models but on mannequins. Stripped back, almost like a scrapbook. And somehow exactly what you'd expect from Anderson. Understated, but full of meaning. A few days later, Loewe made it official. The new creative directors would be Jack McCullough and Lázaro Hernandez, better known as the duo behind Proenza Scholar. And that's when the questions started. Because yes, they're respected designers. They helped shape the downtown New York look in the late 2000s. Their PlayStation 1 bag defined an era. Their shows have always had polish, structure, and that art school sensibility. But Loewe isn't a blank slate anymore. It's not 2013. And Anderson didn't just refresh the brand. He built the version of Loewe we know now from the ground up. So where does that leave Proenza's arrival? In some ways, it feels like a safe move. McCullough and Hernandez are seasoned. They know how to run a business. They've won CFDA awards. They understand accessories, craft, and branding. But that's also part of the concern. Safe doesn't always work in fashion, especially not after a decade of surreal, offbeat, unpredictable Loewe. And there's pressure now. Back when Anderson took over, Loewe had nothing to prove. It was under the radar, forgotten by most. Today, it's at the top of the list index. It's worn by Rihanna and Beyoncé. It's become the go-to name for fashion insiders who don't want to follow the obvious choices. That's a lot to walk into. The fear is that the weirdness, the charm, gets polished out. Because let's be honest, Proenza Scholar hasn't been a hype brand in years. Their recent collections have been clean, wearable, refined. But they haven't sparked the same kind of conversation. Their appointment might make sense on paper. But Loewe didn't become the brand it is today by playing it safe. It became Loewe because it took risks and pulled them off. Now the brand is in a new phase. Post-Anderson, post-surrealism, post-underdog. And the truth is, no one knows what it's going to look like. The duo could breathe fresh life into the brand. Or they could just keep things running, slowly sanding off the edges until it's smooth, elegant, and forgettable. Because when a brand climbs this high, the real challenge isn't growth, it's staying interesting. Now that Anderson is out, Loewe is in a strange place. Not in decline, not in crisis, just uncertain. It's no longer the underdog brand no one saw coming. It's not the breakout success climbing the list charts either. It's established, profitable, watched closely. which is exactly what makes the next move so risky. The hype cycle doesn't wait. It shifts fast. And the things that made the brand feel different, the surrealism, the awkwardness, the sense of not trying to please everyone, those things don't survive by default. They have to be protected. If the new direction plays it too safe, the brand could hold steady, but lose the edge that made people care. If it tries too hard to stay weird, it risks becoming a caricature of what it once was. That's the tension now. Not whether Loewe can keep selling bags. It will. The real question is whether it can stay interesting in a market where taste changes faster than trends. Do you think Loewe can stay interesting without Anderson? Or was this the peak? Either way, it's one of those moments where fashion could go in a completely new direction. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.